Okay, today in Israeli city of Afula is taking place near Nazareth festival. There is taking place a premiere of the film Oleg. I'm talking with the widow of Oleg Vidov, and at the same time as the producer of this film, Joan Borsten Видов. Hello, Joan.
Good morning. How are you?
It's evening in Israel.
Okay, good evening.
I'm fine. So in an interview, I read that you have an Israeli citizenship. I was told that you speak in Hebrew, and what connects you to Israel?
Well, I came to Israel for the first time for a week in 1966, before the Six-Day War, and I stood on the Mandelbaum Gate, and I looked at Jerusalem, very busy, modern, commercial on one side, and on the other side, it was sort of like in the 15th century. And I came back in 1973 in June to go to Ulpan and learn Hebrew. And we went to Arad, and there were many university educated young Jews from all over the world. And I was in Kita Aleph Menos. And to my surprise, on Yom Kippur, I was looking out the window into the Merkaz, and it should have been totally silent, and there shouldn't have been any movement from cars. And suddenly all these trucks were driving in, and men were running out and getting into the cars, and nobody would tell us what was going on. And finally we heard that there was a war. So we thought, okay, well, 6 days it'll be over, but it wasn't. So with the friends that I had made in Ulpan, everybody from the Ulpan was sent to a kibbutz to hoe tomatoes. We didn't want to do that. So we called around. One of us was from New Delhi. And finally, the Rosh HaMoatzah from Yerucham said, oh, you're from India. We have many Indians here. Come and help us during the war. So we all somehow managed to get to Yerucham, and we spent the war in Yerucham, cleaning out bomb shelters and entertaining the troops. Were Druze. They weren't Jews at all, which was fine. But we figured that out when they said we sang a Yiddish song, and they didn't respond. So after that, we went back to Arad. We finished Ulpan, and we moved to Jerusalem. And just by chance, I wrote a story about my trip home to visit my parents, called Back Home in the Diaspora. And I didn't know what to do with it. And somehow the Jerusalem Post published it, and people started calling the Jerusalem Post, and they said, oh, she's a journalist. So that's how I became a journalist, and the Jerusalem Post hired me. And my job was actually to cover the non-Jewish minority, Druze, Arabs, Cherkessim, the Black Hebrews in Dimona. And it was quite interesting. And then when Sadat came to Israel, they needed someone to commute to Cairo to write not news stories, but feature stories. And I was the only one that didn't have a family. So I got nominated. And so I traveled between Tel Aviv and Cairo until Sadat was assassinated. And in the meantime, the Los Angeles Times hired me to do stories for them as well, based on entertainment. And so I got to do a lot of stories where I went for both newspapers. And at some point I started traveling to Arab countries. I went to Syria and reported on the tiny Jewish community in Damascus. I went to, this is before the war, I went to Lebanon, I went to Jordan. Then I went to the Arab Gulf. I went to Morocco. I went to Tunisia. It was a very exciting job. And then in 1984, I moved to Rome. And I should say that I think in 1983, the LA Times sent me to New Delhi to interview the fortune teller of the famous Italian director Federico Fellini. Because he had a very interesting correspondence with the Indian guru, and he would send him scripts, and the guru would tell him whether he thought that they were good or bad. So after I interviewed him, he took my hand and he said, you're going to marry a man from a strange country. I wrote it down. So I went to a lot of, third world, fourth world countries, and I kept thinking, is this the one? And then I moved to Rome in 1984. And all of a sudden, this Soviet actor was calling my friend, who was an American actor, and saying, I'm coming to Rome to defect. Can I stay with you? Well, I was staying there because I was in between apartments, so I didn't think it was a good idea, but they ignored me. And he didn't come, and he didn't come. And then I went to do a sweep through Israel and Cairo, and I came back, and there he was.
So it sounds like your connection to Israel is much deeper than a. Okay, so I just want to ask you, Joan, how and when did you meet Oleg?
I think I met Oleg on July 4th, 1985. We were both staying with an American actor whose name is Richard Harrison. And if you've seen a movie called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Richard is the actor that Quentin Tarantino based half of the character of Leonardo DiCaprio on, the one who went to Italy and became a movie star there, and then came back to America with his wife, Francesca. That's Richard Harrison. So that's how I met, and he followed me around the house speaking in very broken English. He had a lot of adjectives and nouns, but he had the verbs in the present, but he couldn't speak in the future or the past. And he was very emotionally distressed because he had done something very almost unbelievable. He illegally crossed the border from Yugoslavia into Austria. And then he was in the West, and then he realized he had left his homeland forever because he couldn't go back. And so he followed me around the house. I was trying to complete a story for the LA Times, and he kept talking and talking. And I listened to the point that I could. I missed my deadline with the LA Times. And I don't know, things just happened.
I see.
But I had no idea who he really was. We knew he was a Soviet actor.
So that's the next question I wanted to ask you. When you met him, did you know who he is?
We knew he was a Soviet actor, and we knew that the US Embassy had given him political asylum, but that was all I knew. He didn't have anything with him. He didn't have photographs. He didn't have videos. He didn't have anything. And then we were walking around Rome. We like to walk around Rome in the afternoons, and someone yells, Oleg Vidov. And, he was so afraid of the KGB that he was always wearing a baseball cap pulled down over his face so that they couldn't recognize him if they were in Rome. And it was an American film critic who used to go to the Moscow Film Festival named Albert Johnson. And he said, do you know who this is? And I said, he's a Soviet actor. And he said, no, my dear, he's the Robert Redford of Russia. And I thought, oh my God.
Okay, so did you know something about his glory in Soviet Union?
Nothing. Well, except what he kept saying, that he kept saying he was an actor and he'd done this movie and he'd done that movie, but who knew those movies?
Okay, what do you think? Did Oleg think at going to America that he could continue his career as an actor?
He actually it was interesting. He wanted to be free, and he didn't care if he was going to be an actor or if he was going to drive a taxi initially. And but when he left for the United States on September 1st, I had arranged for the LA Times to meet him at the airport, and that led to story after story from coast to coast. It was really quite amazing. And then he sort of had no choice but to try to become an actor in the United States. But, his English wasn't good. It was okay, but it wasn't good. They were offering him lead parts, and it was still the Cold War, and there were no good looking Soviets. Either you were a KGB officer, or you were, some terrible bureaucrat, or you were a member of the mafia. And he didn't fit in any of those parts. And a lot of times, I've told the story before, that the scripts, had required you to say how much you hate the Soviet Union and the Soviet people, and he wasn't prepared to do that.
So did he regret leaving Russia, leaving Soviet Union?
No,
Not at all.
not at all. I mean, culturally, he was always a Russian. He loved his Russian heritage, but he didn't like being told what to do all the time. And he had had many opportunities to do films for important Western directors. He had an opportunity to have a contract with Dino De Laurentiis to do films in the West for 7 years. And each time Goskino said no. And he felt that that was not fair to him.
I see. How did the idea about this film came about?
This film, the documentary?
Yeah.
So when he passed unexpectedly, he'd been writing his autobiography for 3 years. So Oleg always gave me huge jobs to do. He was sure that I could do them for him. So it began with the animation project, and then it's not in the movie, but it's then we helped a famous Russian addiction doctor found a clinica for addicts. And then previous to that, we'd been involved with an airline, and he always said, "Oh, Joan can do this." And I always said, "I can't. Who can do that kind of a project? It's enormous." So anyway, he'd been writing his autobiography. So now he left me another big job. He left me a list of 60 some people to interview to fill in the chapters that he hadn't completed. And they were in 8 different countries. And I kind of ignored it, and I went to bed, and I was just miserable. And then I woke up one day and I thought, I have something to do for him. Let me do this. And together with my Hollywood friends, we decided that we should film the interviews because maybe it was also a documentary. And that, in fact, is what happened. So we took many of the interviews that we did and combined them into the documentary that I hope I used those interviews and others to finish the autobiography.
Okay. To your mind, what new the people that will watch this film will learn about Oleg?
I think that they will learn that besides being a very good-looking individual, that he was very kind, he was very talented, he was very interested in people and in helping people. All kinds of things that I don't know that all Russians know.
Okay, I see. This film was made during the coronavirus. How difficult was to bring people from different places and different countries together to film it?
No, I traveled. I began by going to Canada, and from Canada to Belgrade, and from Belgrade to Sarajevo, and from Sarajevo to Austria, and from Austria to Berlin. And then I did 2 trips to Russia. I did many interviews in the United States as well, but mostly I traveled. And we were almost done with the film when the United States and the rest of the world actually went into lockdown. So we still had some interviews to do, but most important, we wanted to film the Oleg's escape from these incredible escape from Yugoslavia to Austria. And we couldn't do it because we couldn't go. The borders were all shut down and we had to wait. And in the end, the director who lives in Melbourne, Australia, this is thanks to modern technology, was able to direct and film the entire sequence from her office in Melbourne. And the filming took place not in Australia, but it took place on the Austrian-Slovenian border. It was quite a feat, but she had all this equipment in front of her that allowed her to, the only thing she couldn't do was to control the drone.
Sounds
Isn't that amazing?
Very complicated project.
It was.
Okay, so my last question, what is the main message that you as a filmmaker convey to the audience?
I think that for some people, and in fact, people are responding to the non-Russians or non-Soviets, let's say, are responding to the movie very emotionally because it's about freedom and it's about someone who was willing his life, his country, because he wanted to be free. And I think that's true of a lot of people. And especially somehow today in many countries, people still want to be free and the governments are being repressive. And so I think the message is that you have to follow your heart. And if your heart leads you to a different country to start over, then you do, because the most important thing is you want to be free.
Okay, תודה רבה.
Hello, the Vel.
כל טוב.